we are going to start. Please take a seat, please. It's a pleasure. I have the pleasure of opening the 23rd annual conference of the Network of European Museum Organizations. This is my first time opening the conference as the chairperson, and it's an honor to do it and to welcome you here in the Czech Republic, in Pilsen, and in this wonderful theater opened in the very beginning of the last century. Vážení kolegovi kolegyně, vítáme vás ve Pilsni, Evropské hlavní město kultury v roce 2015. Vítáme vás ve Pilsni, dnes hlavní město evropských sítí uměleckých muzeí. Okay, I'm happy that you have understood what I've said. I try it in English, it's easier. About 50 museum networks are represented today. So Pilsen is not only the European capital of culture, but also today and tomorrow, the European capital of museum networks and museum networking. Because this year we have participants from 30 different countries. So please seize the opportunity to network, to connect, to share your knowledge and practice, to exchange ideas with other participants. Participants you already know and participants you will get to know. Revisiting the educational value of museums, connecting to audiences, that's the title of this conference. NEMO believes indeed that museums have an impact on people, a social and an educational impact. Museums are institutions offering formal and informal learning to people of all profiles by inspiring and engaging them as well as helping them to understand the world and to understand their place within it. That is not the reality, but it's our mission and it's our program. Education is often seen as the main function of museums. That is good, but we still have to develop this field and respond to ever-changing needs from our audiences. It's why we invite you today to revisit the educational value of museum with experts and decision makers from museum and museum organizations from all over Europe, Czech Republic, of course, Nordic and Baltic regions, Poland, Portugal, and from all over the world also. Our guests from the AAM, the American Alliance of Museums, IBER Museos, and ASMS are going to speak about audience and education beyond Europe. I'd like to notice another important element of this conference, the Creative Europe desk for the Czech Republic. If you want to be involved in cooperation, international European cooperation project, if you want to get the European Heritage Alliance, European Heritage label, if you want to apply for another award from like the Europa Nostra Award, please ask our colleagues. They are behind you at the Czech information desk of Creative Europe. So thank you that you are here. So I'd like now to wish us a successful conference, and I try it again in Czech. Přeji vám výborný kongres. So now I would like to invite our main hosts on the stage. Without them, NEMO wouldn't be able to organize this conference. First, I would like to invite Vlastislav Ouroda. It's a small change in the program, but it's a very important person too. He is the Deputy Minister for Cultural Heritage in the Ministry of Culture. So Vlastislav Ouroda, please come here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, It's a great honor for me to take part in this event. I highly appreciate the work of the experts in the field of education in museums. The theme of the conference is focused on the role of this form of education in the changing world. It's a great opportunity to share your professional experience from different conditions. I'm sure that your discussion can contribute to the effort to find new solutions in this field. As a representative of the executive body in the care of museums in this country, I would like to stress that we are ready to learn from another systems and case studies. Allow me please to thank warmly especially our foreign guests and wish you a nice stay in this exceptional city with many layers of history. Thank you very much for your invitation and thank you for attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ouroda. We are very proud to be here in the Czech Republic. Now I invite Ondřej Dostál, he is new elected chairman of the Czech Association of Museum and Gallery. The association celebrates this year 25 years, its 25th anniversary, and we are happy to be here during this important time for our partner network in the Czech Republic. Please, Ondřej.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, David, thank you for your words. Welcome in Pilsen on behalf of AMG, Association of Museums and Galleries of Czech Republic. We are very proud to welcome you here in Pilsen in relation to our General Assembly, because it's a great opportunity for us to meet colleagues from Europe, colleagues from museums, colleagues who are interested in questions in education in museums. I have to say a few thanks to our partners, to supporters of our conference, especially to Pilsen region for biggest support for our conference, Pilsen 2015 OPS, the town of Pilsen, Ministry of Culture, thank you, and Ministry of Education of Czech Republic. And the second is the auspices, because the importance of the conference or the view on the importance of the conference is or are the auspices. We got auspices and our conference is held under the auspices of Prime Minister of Czech Republic, Bohuslav Sobotka, Daniel Herman, Minister of Culture, Kateřina Valachová, Ministry of Education, Václav Šlajs, President of the Pilsen region, and Martin Zrzavecký, Mayor of the city of Pilsen. And the last words, I wish you, and I wish you all of us, successful and fruitful conference which could open new connections, new ideas, and new opportunities for all of us. Thank you.
And now I invite the third host of the NEMO conference, Jiří Sulženko. He's the program director of Pilsen 2015 organization. He's responsible for the preparation and the program of the European Year, European Capital of Culture, Pilsen 2015. Jiří.
Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you here on behalf of the Pilsen 2015 European Capital of Culture and also on behalf of Mr. Martin Baxa, the Vice Mayor for Culture, who wished to be here to welcome you in person, but he is unfortunately having other important business to deal with. I'm really very happy that all of you gathered here in Pilsen this year. The European Capital of Culture should be seen I think it also confirmed the position that it's an opportunity. It's not a festival of highlights or fireworks, but it's a great opportunity for a lot of people to meet in one place. We've had an enormous number of conferences this year, but they all were worth it, and they all were a great place for meetings, for exchanges, for discussions. I'm also really happy that you will spend a day tomorrow in the Depot 2015, which is one of the hot points and hotspots of European Capital of Culture. It's run by our association, our NGO, which has dedicated quite a lot of effort to create an exhibition program and educational program. And our general goal in European Capital of Culture here in Pilsen is to build new audiences and to give them opportunity to really experience a lively cultural institution, not a closed or hidden one, but the one that really responds to their daily needs, daily program. So I will be very happy also to discuss this with you tomorrow in the evening to give you a small presentation. So I'm really happy to welcome you here in Pilsen again. I hope that you will enjoy the days to come, and please excuse my design under the nose, but this is not that I became a smuggler of audiences into museums or cultural institutions. I'm just promoting the campaign of movember.com, so find more yourself. Have a nice day.
Thank you again for our main host here in Pilsen. Now we move on to the first presentation of this conference, a presentation focusing on an education project from the Czech Republic with a European dimension. This project is called Touch the 20th Century and will be presented by Pavel Douša. Pavel Douša worked at Prague Zoo and at the National Museum. He was editor-in-chief on the journal called Museum for 8 years, and is now consultant in museum studies, cultural heritage, and marketing. The project Touch the 20th Century brought him to think about the role of all the actors of museum education, the role of curator, the role of teachers, parents, and students. And this presentation is also a good opportunity to give us an overview about the Czech museum landscape. So Pavel Douša, the stage is yours.
Good morning. Sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here, but David has said always everything what I would like to. But on Wednesday, it's my pleasure, and I think it's an honor for Czech Republic that you organize your General Assembly or meeting here. And on Wednesday, I got a little bit scared because I recognized that I'm the first speaker, in the presentation, and only one from the Czech Republic, this day. So, mind the fact that I'm not the best, I'm not the representative. There are many genuine, smart, clever curators, directors of museum here in Czech Republic, but that's it. And please, I would like to show you our experience with educational program with the name Touch the 20th Century. But yesterday I spoke with David, and maybe it would be fine to say some words about Czech museums and about our situation in Europe, So at first, I would like to present you some facts about our museums. Yeah, it's me. Now I'm working as a consultant and freelance curator. And let's move on. Yeah, that's the name of my my presentation. I borrow it from the very popular and famous movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because I would like to speak about cooperation and communication among curators, teachers, students, and museum audience at all. Because the communication, it's not always obvious and clear. Who has seen the movie? Not everyone, but almost. And who has been to National Museum Prague? Oh, almost everyone. That's great. So I would like to introduce you the planet, the Czech, with the name the Czech Republic. And secondly, I focusing on study of behavior of curator and his or her role in communication with teachers. Yeah, there are logos of two projects that I would like to present. Touch the 20th century, sorry, it's only in Czech, and Europeana 1989, probably you know the Europeana Foundation and this specific project. Yeah, let's check Czech museums. So we have a long tradition. Last year we have started a celebration of 200th anniversary of founding the first museum in the Czech Republic. In 1814 in Opava, Stropau, and in 1817 there were founded a museum in Brno, and 1818 in Prague, National Museum. All of them are or were provincial museum. Now they are state museums. So we have almost 20 state museums governed by Ministry of Culture or Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Defense. There are regional museums, around 20 as well, or 30, and there are municipal town cities, small museum, and of course private museums. Of course, there is AMG, Association of Museums and Galleries in Czech Republic working, and National Committee of ICOM, and we celebrate of 25th the anniversary of the founding this association. It's not association of museum professionals, I mean curators, conservators, but it's association of museums. Museums are a member of this association. It's a slight difference between among other countries. So the golden age of Czech museology or museum studies is over. It was in the 1960s, probably you know Zbigněk Stránsky, person of museology, but we will see what happened next year. But we follow the good examples. And I have to mention, of course, the political situation that has big impact of museums even after the Welvet Revolution, and it was communist period, and ideology that misused the museums, and our audience is reflecting this fact, and to remember how museums were working during this period, and we have to mind this fact, the ideas about us and what we are doing in the museums. In the last few years, many private museums have been established, like science centers. For example, here in Pilsen, Techmania, or industrial heritage sites are very, very popular. For example, Vítkovice area. Yeah, let's move on to education and educational role in the museum. So from the 60s we have annual conferences in Zlín Museum and School, and the project Open Museum Gates has big impact at our museums. In these years, many museums recognize their role as educational institution, and that was great that it could be founded by the Soros Foundation. Yeah, we have a Methodical Center for Museum Pedagogy, Commission for Museum Pedagogy by AMG, and last thing that I would like to point out is that the profession museum educator is not recognized here by the law in the Czech Republic. So it's a little bit, it's like a problem here. Yeah, setting as an arrangement, of course, we recognize us and directors, curators are making visit-friendly museums, participatory museums. We have heard about happy museums and these initiatives from London, which would like to create conditions for well-being. We have also eco-museums, it means community museums. And we reflect digital shift and networked area. And the last point is empty museums. Many museums here in the Czech Republic are reconstructed here in these times. For example, National Museum Prague, or Museum of Fine Arts in Prague as well. National Technical Museum has been reconstructed, and so on and so on. And it's a very important fact because the fact that the museum is closed changed the thinking of directors and curators what to do and how to cooperate with the public and their engagement. Yeah. Trends in museum learning, just only slide because everyone knows it, so that's it. And let's go to the projects that I mentioned in the beginning. As an example, I choose two projects dealing with interpretations of 20th century, especially the second half of the 20th century, because it's a little bit different to engage people of art or fine art or political issues. It's not easy topic, neither in school education nor in a museum from the country that's undergone a totalitarian regime. There are but only a few textbooks, learning methodologies, and in museums there is low documentation and interpretation of this period. That was a challenge for us regarding the fact that curators in the Czech Republic are not interested. Yeah, it's general. I'm sorry, it's in are not interested in education that is outside of scientific frame. They like to share and present their research in media, present it to their colleagues, but not ready to recognize participatory dimension of interpretation and active role of public. So both projects are public engagement projects. Touch 20th Century is a project to create educational materials for teaching history and presents to teachers what museums are and what they are standing for, what are benefit for them, for schools, for teachers. The main goal was rebuild connection, trust between curators and audiences. Because very often in this time when there is a specialization in museum professionals, so curators are hidden somewhere in the storages, and there is someone like an interpreter, lecturer, or educator. So our aim was to make a connection, to pull the curator from depositories and prove that they really exist. Yeah, so project is over. It was 2012 and 2014, and we try to find material objects of the past, touching stories, and to reuse or use them in formal and informal learning. Yeah, there are just only, a list of outputs of the project, so you can read them. The main focus was on replicas of museum objects, and we made cartoons, comics, worksheets, e-learning applications based on serious gaming, and so on. We would like to promote it to the teachers, and we have involved almost 5,000 pupils, students. So I would like to thank to my colleagues from National Museum and other museums, because it was a project of 6 museums and Charles University and Association of Museums and Galleries in the Czech Republic and Association of Teachers of History. So, and I have to mention almost 400 teachers who we cooperate with. Of course, among students, we prepare a website and so on, and among students, very popular interactive and multimedia outputs, video recordings, audio recordings, 3D models, and there are made special website portal with name asbirky.cz. It means something like e-collections in English, where is almost 60,000 artifacts published. Yeah, it's nothing new. Already in 1884, as I found, Henry Higgins started circulating museums, loan boxes to schools. So now it's almost 150 years after it. But we succeed. It had huge success among the teachers, schools, and students as well. We were afraid how students will accept replicas. Yeah, you know, we are curators, so we like the right, the things, not fakes, not copies. will the students or teacher consider them as fakes or toys? Surprisingly, the finding is that they did not deal with these differences as we in museums or museum professionals. But they were afraid to touch them, even if they were replicas, as it would be something like encounter of the third kind. For them, I mean students, is more acceptable and understandable photographies, pictures of the object than the object themselves. Working with digital form of objects for students is attractive, especially because it corresponds to their perceptions for them to understand and to meet the thing that it's not in a showcase, it's something like radically new experience. What's important is a perspective, I mean perspective of students' life. So what they know from their lives, it always unlocked their interest and understanding. So if they prepare their own exhibitions, virtual or hard version, so they prepare something what they knew. Yeah, and just only pictures of our outputs. It's e-learning activity, and this series game. That's the name of the game is Destiny or Career, and students or pupils can follow the real lives of people of 20th century, and they can decide about their life. They make decisions in key years like 1938, 1984, and so on. So they can become a president or died after 5 or 7 years. It was very popular among students. Yeah, we made an anthology of sound and folklore. We prepared student competitions. They prepared their own comics, cartoons, and their own museum suitcases with things that they found at homes. They discussed their project with parents, and we like it that we put together generations. Yeah, this was their own exhibition about 80s in Czechoslovakia, and you can see that they worn dresses and clothes of their parents. And they spoke as their parents, what they heard at home. So it was, and they follow this facts, even that we said to them that it was slightly different that their parents said. So it's a very important thing. Yeah, we prepare worksheets, and this is the portal sbirky.cz e-collection. And this is just an example how the one museum object looks like. It's ballets from National Museum from 1968. You will see it in the movie. Yeah, and the students prepare their own exhibition, own collections. We would like to present how the museum works. So they play a role of curators or educators among them in their classrooms. Of course, they visited our museums, and we prepare online exhibition, and this is the National Museum, National Monument in Vítkov Hill in Prague. Originally, if it was a monument of legionaries, and then a mausoleum of Klement Gottwald. Probably you have heard about our first communist president. And inside there is a museum, there is an exhibition about Czech modern history. I recommend it if you have time. Yeah, and that is the students' collections of pictures from 1989. Yeah, and almost the last slide, conclusion achievements that we did. I choose a picture, not from the National Museum, it's Memory Jar project, from Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, when visitors were invited to bottle up their memory, label it, and put in the exhibition and share it with others. So it's an example how we try to cooperate with the audience and engage them. So I think that we, in our project, the museum lost our status, important but boring institution. The project has demonstrated an active and direct collaboration between curators and teachers. And teachers changed from passive recipients of learning materials and strategies from museums into very open and active collaborators. We were surprised when we allowed them to visit our storage rooms and exhibitions and look behind the scenes. In this project has been described and proved that museum is not the school cabinet and supportive institution for teaching and learning, but independent educational institution. Although the objects or replicas were applied in completely different environment than a museum showcase is, teachers and students gain an overview of how the museum is working and what it is its role. We have interconnected generations, and last point that I would like to present to you is that the objects made available through modern technologies are not digital, from my point of view, or digital copies, but unique connections. I mean, something like encounter of third kind, connection of information, people, and they are curators, students, witnesses, audience, and so on, and technology. Therefore, I'm talking about socio-technical interaction that in a specific way goes beyond the physical dimension and value authenticity which a museum of 19th and 20th century was working with. So, museum and its future, I think in some way is that it's something like bridge between system of knowledge, I mean classification, taxonomy, and so on, and folksonomy, which people brings to us, to curators, and their knowledge. Curator must cooperate with community, maybe more in these times than with collection. And this is, the last one. I've started to spoke about the shift in the work of curators. And from my point of view, curating will be more and more connected with social media and concentrated on present more than past. Museums inspire and engage people. They are learning institutions with educational value. To fulfill this function, I think it's a statement of NEMO as well. The museum, or we have to recognize distinction between expert curation and community curation. And museums are based on the call-in conversation where everyone gets to have an opinion and be an expert. And in the end, I would like to show you a short movie. It has, if I have time, 2 minutes, about the project. I'm sorry, it's in Czech. The song is in English, but I can ask you to launch it. I try to comment it, but just only a short movie to get impression, because by this movie we would like to attract teachers to the museums and to our projects. It's the building of the National Museum. It's empty now because it's reconstructed. It's the interior of the building. So thank you again. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pavel Douša, for this introduction about one project engaging a lot of actors. You have seen it in involving some Czech museums with a European dimension. That was an introduction. Now we can move to the next part of this conference of this morning. The panel introduced and moderated by Margherita Sani. Hi.
Thank you very much. So we move into the core business of our conference, museum education, and what it looks like not only in the Czech Republic, but in Europe, in the many countries that are represented here today. When I was asked to moderate this session, I first stopped and thought about the word education. What does it mean today in museums? What goes under education? And so I started thinking of words. There is one word which I think has become obsolete. Edutainment. Who has heard the word edutainment recently? All right. So that has disappeared. And words and the frequency with which we use words mean something. So what does it mean? Does it mean that it has become commonplace or just taken for granted that education has to be entertaining? It has just disappeared. But other words have appeared. And they seem to be packing the suitcase or the toolkit or the toolbox of the museum educator, such as community, participation, public engagement, community empowerment, intercultural dialogue, inclusion. All of these seem to be now something that the museum educator has to deal with, which means that it has become a very tough job for museum educators to move onto the scene now, because in my experience, there are more and more challenges that are posed to museum educators. All these new activities, all these new competencies, they are very often the remit of the museum education office or department, simply because the museum education department is the one that deals with the public. So all that goes under public engagement, and there are many activities that are covered under that term, are those that the museum educators have to deal with. So the scene at European level is very rich, is very varied, and I think that we are very lucky to have this morning a panel which enlighten us and give us perspectives from the different European countries. So, as a first speaker, we have with us Kalle Kallio, who is the director of the Finnish Labour Museum in Tampere, a national museum of working life and social history. And I think we are particularly lucky to have here a museum director. Very often the complaint from the museum education staff is that education is not really at the core of the top level management of museums. In this case, we have exactly a very lucky situation where a museum director is very much into education, a thinker about education and educational activities and theories. So I was looking at Kalle's abstract that he provided for his speech, and I was really struck by one sentence. Museums are not very good for fixed learning objectives. What does it mean? I mean, of course, the museum has fixed learning objectives. We want to teach our groups of pupils or adults or whatever, what our city was like in the Roman time, or we want to introduce a Flemish or natural landscape painting. Of course, we want to achieve objectives, and these fixed objectives are also reflected or should be reflected in the learning outcomes. We have learned, we have been used to provide exact evidence that our learning activities end up in very clear learning outcomes which we try to measure. Some years ago, there was a commercial on Italian TV which went like this. There was a young girl on the telephone, and she was talking evidently with the boyfriend, and she was going, "Do you love me? How much do you love me?" And of course, the mother in the background said, "Oh, how much do you cost me?" because she was on the phone. How much do you love me? This is an important question. This is, trying to measure the unmeasurable. So is museum learning, in a way, not measurable? That we do provide facts and contents, but that in the end, the final outcome of this learning is not only the facts that we absorb, but it is much more something different that we have difficulties in assessing, that sometimes can only be visible long term. So this sentence of Kallio, opened up all this thinking in my head, and I'm very happy that he will explain us what he meant, and that he will probably widen our perspective in thinking of museum learning as something much more complex than just simply transferring content and facts. As with Kalle, I would invite all speakers afterwards to stay on stage when the presentation is finished for taking questions, which will be taken at the end of each presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to introduce to you Kalle Kallio. Thank you.
Thank you, Margherita, for your very nice word. I hope that my museum educators would have also heard those. Dear friends and colleagues, thank you for inviting me to join NEMO conference. 12 years ago, just after my graduation, I used to work in the Finnish Museums Association. At that time, my boss Anja Huovinen was chairing NEMO, and after NEMO meetings like this, she always shared with us all the inspiring thoughts and ideas. I remember I was sitting at our small coffee table in the office and thinking how great it would be to come to museum conference like this one day. Well, and today, after all that local beer, I feel extremely privileged that finally I'm able to join NEMO conference for the first time, and you have even asked me to show you some of my silly images. So here we go. I will start my presentation with this picture because this is exactly the thing I'm going to talk to you. What do you see in this picture? What it is? Collection. No, it's not a collection. Museum people. What it is? What? Wood. No, it's not wood. View. No, it's not a view. No, it's not forest. It's not woods. It's not wilderness. It's not a landscape. It's not a commercial from the Finnish tourist agency either. Good suggestions. But I'm not a biologist. I'm not a salesman who could talk about those issues. Dear friends, this is an open learning environment. You know, learning is a universal phenomenon, and it's not even our privilege as humans. I will tell you, this forest is full of animals able to learn and adapt themselves to their environment. This is their open learning environment. I would like to give just one interesting example. This is a bear, king of the Finnish forest. One friend of mine has a summer cottage in eastern Finland. Many Finns, we love our summer cottages, and we go there almost every weekend in summertime to eat and drink and have barbecue and so on. And my friend had a little problem because bears practically invaded the isolated waste containers where around 30 families brought garbage from their summer houses. And every Sunday evening there were bears behind the trash cans, waiting for the scraps of those wonderful Finnish barbecue parties. In the old times, people would have, of course, shot the bears. But today we have European Union, and they will get really mad in Brussels if we Finns obey our aggressive instincts. So my friend and his neighborhood had to find another way. Well, they bought a smart locking device, which would keep the recycle bin locked. And first everything went well. The trash was untouched. But after some months, it turned out that one of the bears had surprisingly learned to open the lock. You can imagine a big bear sitting near the trash can, thinking, smelling, touching, trying to open the cover, and finally was able to do that. And soon this clever fellow taught other bears to do the same trick. Learning by experiencing is the most natural way to learn. It's part of evolution, and learning has been important ability which has kept us alive, really. We can learn, just like bears, by watching, thinking, moving around, smelling, and communicating with our kind. Of course, humans are especially good in learning, but sometimes we forget that our learning is not at all restricted to listening lectures and like this, or reading. We learn all the time and basically everywhere. Actually, we learn most of the things in non-formal situation. We learn by talking to each other, we learn watching television, we learn when drinking beer, we learn by walking through our hometown. Learning is so natural that most of the time we are quite unaware of it. Let's have another picture of my subjects. What is this? Open learning environment. You can see there's learning in this room. Yeah, just like the forest. You can see, this is my museum. It's a Finnish labor museum. It's located in the former cotton mill in the centrum of Tampere. Museums can be compared to other learning environments like libraries or internet. All of them can be used for searching information from our own individual interests. But museums are also a very special media for art and culture. For example, in theaters, cinemas, concerts, or sport events, the audience stays in their seats and watch the same show. This is turned upside down in a museum, where the display stays still and audience is moving. Visitors explore the same exhibition, but they do it in their own ways, wander almost randomly, see and learn different things. Because of these individual experiences, museums are not good for fixed learning objectives. However, museums quite often try to build closed learning environments inside their buildings. Museums have auditoriums and classrooms, just like schools. These are closed and formal environments for learning. Sometimes they are useful, but not at all the heart of museum education and its open character. The Finnish Labour Museum was founded in 1993, and we are the National Museum of Social History and Working Life in Finland. After some recent museum mergers, we are now running 2 or actually 3 museum sites. Beside our main house, we have a small Museum of the Deaf, which was actually founded already in 1915, 100 years ago. It has a very unique collection about sign language users. Our 3rd museum is currently under renovation. It's a Lenin museum. If you did not know it, Lenin and Stalin met each other for the first time in Tampere in 1905 and started plotting the Russian Revolution. The museum used to be rather propagandistic, and in the 1990s it was the last Lenin museum in the world. But it's now under renovation, and next summer it will be the coolest museum on earth, a birthplace of Soviet Union, objective and interesting representation of transnational histories of Finland and Soviet Union. The reason why we renewed the Lenin Museum is actually shed in our mission statement. I'm very proud of it. It's just 2 words: fair history. Firstly, this means that we have a fair amount of collections, exhibitions and services. And secondly, we have a fair policy like free entry, and we are good partners as well. You can try it. Third and most important aspect is our fair understanding of history. We give a voice to the underrepresented, like ordinary people, minorities and marginalities. We are irritatingly critical, and fostering personality cults was not really our task. But learning, it has been an important aim for us. We have managed to run several projects to develop museum education for different audiences. We have been especially interested in action-based education, but our selection of methods includes drama, lectures, and even parties as well. We have also done projects with different audiences and also with challenging groups like deaf communities, mental health patients, and vocational schools. Most of the museums have plenty of educational activities, but it's not so common to study their outcomes. Our main exhibition is called Our Town, and it serves our new strategy quite well. It tells about Finnish labor heritage, working life, workers' housing, civil society, and so on. We have used old museum technology, like interiors and models, with new technology of sound and multimedia. The big decision was the removal of glass cases and text panels. All the texts are included in multimedia kiosks and in a guidebook. Our idea was to support different kinds of learning. When the exhibition was completed, we wanted to make a small research about learning outcomes. We asked what visitors learned and how. Like most other museums, Finnish labor museums carry out annual visitor surveys which present reliable information on visitor satisfaction. However, standardized questionnaires do not cover the diversity of museum learning. We wanted to have a deeper understanding of our visitors and their learning. Overall, 30 visitors were selected and interviewed right after their museum visit. But 6 months later, 15 of them were called for another follow-up interview. Their answers were analyzed, applying the conceptual model of learning presented by John Falk and Lynn Deaking. I think that Falk and Deaking have useful perspectives to study relations between individuals and environments in museum learning. The conceptual model of learning divides the learning in personal, sociocultural, and physical context. The fourth context is time. The results proved that museum visit usually creates unexpected outcomes. There was lots of unintentional and interesting learning that we haven't ever thought about before. Here you can see a switchboard operator, which was very common profession for ladies before our time of iPhones. In one interview, a visitor told about her work as an operator when she was young, answering and connecting phone calls. This kind of personal context can strengthen learning, and museums very often try to invoke this kind of nostalgia. Museums are even expected to present objects that relate to visitors' memoirs. But memories are not always so shiny. For example, a retiring office worker stressed how women have been always oppressed in working life. She was active in the labor movement and mentioned how even the socialist men had not always been on the same side. She came to these conclusions through watching the displays of laundry women and brick carriers in the museum. However, those exhibits do not include explicit feminism, but surely they allow such interpretation. This is like a textbook example of constructivism. Learning is an individual process, and it is greatly influenced by visitors' former knowledge, expectations, and beliefs. The physical context of museum experience is also very important. People should be able to orient themselves, feel safe, like bears in European Union, and know what they can do in museum premises. Visitors have felt that our main exhibition is not cramped, but there are still various materials and also something to touch. Of course, some visitors don't like our touch screens and would prefer traditional text panels. We have thought that reading is a quite limited way of learning, but for the readers, there is still plenty of text in the multimedias. But of course, removal of text panels was a tough decision. It was somehow against a museum professional's identity. But on the other hand, reading is a quite limited way of learning. Museum should offer something that is not possible in other environments. First of all, authentic objects in real atmosphere. Sociocultural context can be easily observed with families. A translator with her husband and 2 young children had lively discussions in the museum. They came to see the steam engine, but ended up drawing pictures in the workshop. But it was not only interaction with the children. She also told about a lively discussion with her husband about labor issues. Sociocultural context is very important because most of the people do not come to the museums alone, but with friends, families, and among many other groups. As museum professionals, our job is to strengthen this interaction between visitors. The fourth context in Falk's and Deaking's model is time. What the visitor has done and thought before the museum visit is an important factor, but it is also interesting what happens after the visit. Museum is just one link in the chain of lifelong experiences. Learning in the museum is incomplete, and visitors improve their knowledge later. For instance, in their exit interview, the previously mentioned translator's family talked mainly about the steam engine that they came to see. But what happened after the visit? 6 months later, translator related how her daughter was still excited about the old co-op stove. with stocked self in the picture. Museum experience sparked the imagination of the child, who became inspired to play old-time shopkeepers at home. Museum visit can create strong traces in memory, which can afterwards give meaning and motivation in personal life. When researching visitors, it's valuable to have follow-up interviews to recognize some of the long-term outcomes. The museum visitors' experiences can revert to many unexpected situations. For example, a female manager told how she started to think about the evolution of financial sector when she went to the bank and remembered museum's reconstruction of Workers' Mutual Savings Bank. This was one of those learning experiences which were just impossible to predict. The museum experience can prove quite profound. One of the most popular interiors of the Our Town exhibition is a workers' meeting hall, which was not designed to reconstruct any particular hall. On the contrary, it tries to give an impression of the atmosphere in working halls and arouse personal feelings. 5 months after her visit, one visitor participated in a memorial service, which was held in the countryside in an old workers' meeting hall. Then memories from the museum visit broke the tension at the funeral and ended up in a discussion which combined memories of meeting halls with the life of the deceased. Some of the decisions in the exhibition planning were clearly based on constructivism as a learning theory. The exhibition without text and clear instructions is optimal for guided tours, workshops, and living history. Objects allow plenty of personal interpretations, which are not narrowed down with interpretative text. Sometimes objects can even arouse more questions than they give answers. Visitors' movement is neither controlled beforehand. It is possible to explore the exhibitions in many different ways and construct those personal meanings. Of course, with educational work, museum can help visitors to see and understand the exhibition. Our town tries to support different learning styles and audiences. The exhibition was not targeted for the academic audience or social historians. On the other hand, the visiting experience can strengthen everybody's thinking. It can be considered more important to inspire personal feelings, present interesting material, and help people to construct identities than distribute scientific facts to reluctant visitors. And this is especially important for a labor museum that tries to serve also working-class visitors and untrained people not familiar with traditional museum behavior. After building up this exhibition, we have tried to understand museum education also in theoretical framework. At least in Finland, pedagogical thinking is today ruled mainly by cognitive theories and constructivism. Of course, there is nothing very wrong with that. Those learning theories just influence the way museums carry out their educational services today. In the background, those theories define which is seen as a good museum education. Historically, museum education has always reflected the current trends in pedagogical thinking. I just think that museums should be more aware of those learning theories they intentionally or unintentionally apply. For example, in the 19th century, first proper educational theories were based on associationism. Modern museum institutions developed at the same time and adopted the new pedagogical thinking. The object, observation, and organizing concepts of the mind were essential parts of learning. Accordingly, museums organized systematic exhibitions to help visitors to structure their minds with different art styles or stories in the natural history. Then the second point, as a learning theory, functionalism was based on idea of evolution and how humans adapt themselves with their environment. John Dewey was against of book learning, and in his famous laboratory school there was also a small museum. Hands-on learning and action-based workshops have their theoretical roots deep in functionalism. Today, the third, behaviorism, is a suspicious theory of 20th century. It was not based on assumptions, but scientific testing of stimulus and reaction, just like in natural sciences. However, this theory had a huge emphasis in schools and also in museums. For example, questionnaires, audio guides, and loanable slideshows were theoretically based on these ideas of highly controlled learning. Today, there are some similarities in promoting plain language. Just like in behaviorist schoolbooks, plain language instructs us to delete difficult words and phrases to avoid challenges. As I mentioned earlier, cognitive and constructive theories are dominant in schools and museums of today. Most of the literature related to museum education is virtually recognizing only these theories. However, it is never told how constructivism originates from informational sciences and understands human brain as a metaphor for a computer. In constructivism, we'll form our thoughts in our isolated minds and process data. Well, in constructivist museum education, familiar objects are selected to construct wider understanding of the past in our processors. Activity theories are rooted on work of Soviet scientists like Lev Vygotsky or Alexei Leontiev. They stressed the connectedness between humans, our instruments, well, like tools or science, and our environment. These theories have influenced thinking of learning environments and role of learning communities. In museum education, these theories would focus not only on museum environment, but also artifacts which can be used as instruments of thinking. I chose 6 cases to show these links between educational theories and museum practice. My last case is about critical pedagogy, which I have found highly interesting. It's inspiring, especially because there is so close connection between the new museum theory and also social museology. Critical pedagogy is a bit difficult because it's quite incoherent bunch of theories. The best known father of critical pedagogy is Paulo Freire from Brazil, who developed pedagogy of the oppressed. Also, African-American civil rights movement, Antonio Gramsci, Michel Foucault, and Frankfurt School like Jürgen Habermas has influenced critical pedagogy. In a nutshell, critical pedagogy addresses questions: what knowledge will be disseminated, how knowledge is produced, and whose interests all this serves. Overall, education should include critical content, progressive pedagogical principles, and emancipatory authorities. As a result, we will be educating for social justice. As you can notice, all this fits very well in our mission of fair history. As a theory, there are many differences between promoters of critical pedagogy. But it's very common for all these theories that they encourage to challenge hegemonies and question the world. In critical pedagogy, it's not desirable just to absorb information and adapt yourself to the society as it is today. Individuals should be more or less liberated from the visible and invisible chains of society. The key concept is critical consciousness, or Paulo Freire's conscientizatio. The role of the teacher is also very different compared to traditional education. Teaching is empowering and walking together, not argumenting with the voice of authority. Critical theorists have been interested in themes like participation, criticism of schooling, class, race, and gender issues, roles of ideology, and so forth. I have found it fascinating that critical pedagogy has so much in common with the new museum theory. Today, many museums are thinking very similar questions. for example, what we are exhibiting really, how we produce our knowledge, and whose interests we are serving. Museums are facing a lively debate related to museum institutions' authority, elitism, conservatism, and exclusion. Keywords of the new museum thinking are such as accessibility, free entry, diversity, representation, openness, participation, and communities. Today, museums are expected to do things together with different audiences and communities, and our role as authorities is more or less crumbling. I have found many signs from museums all around Europe who are quietly practicing critical pedagogy already. For example, wonderful People's History Museum in Manchester is specialized in drama education. Here they are working with migration history and helping children to position themselves as immigrants. Portimao Museum in southern Portugal is a great example of tourist attraction with a powerful story. The museum is located in a former fish canning factory, and they'll focus on stories of hard work and oppressed people. In the Finnish Labour Museum, we have had many exhibitions with a critical perspective. For example, here's an exhibition about history of disabilities. The exhibition was called Absolutely Abnormal, and the main question was, who is normal, really? These paintings are from the exhibition Me, You and Others, which was an international art exhibition by women artists from Roma communities. It raised the questions of identities in an ethnic minority. Currently, we have an exhibition about African diaspora communities in Finland. During last 5 years, we have also worked with sexual and gender minorities, with the deaf people, with environmental movements and feminists. Our mission of Fair History insists us to fight for social justice and give meaning to the underrepresented people. Museums are institutions, all museums are institutions that increase cultural value. Museum working with marginal phenomena really supports those people who fight for the same themes. For instance, an exhibition of sexual minorities underline that these minorities and their struggles are worth of something just because their story now belongs to the museum. As a museum, we try to help people and various communities to understand their past and encourage them to keep working for a better and more sustainable world. Making our world better, that is the thing museums should be about. Thank you.
For thought, I think, and I would ask you to stay there for a few minutes to see if there are questions from the audience. Or comments.
Thank you. Thank you for your lecture. I really enjoyed your take on education and that it has to have a purpose and some kind of critical thinking. But I want to ask you, when you address these marginal groups, when you talk about because the concept sort of labels also people, so same as with multiculturalism, you know, it's meant for well, with a good thought, but really it also labels and stigmatizes. So I just want to know, how do you think about these groups that you like deaf and like this and like that? So when you have presented them enough, then do they stop being marginal, or how do you, what's your take on that?
Yeah.
I'm from the Icelandic Museum Association. My name is Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you for your question. It's a very good one, and it's really a problem because we can be rather naive when we are starting to work with communities, or and the museum makes a big mistake if it thinks that it actually represents those communities. It does not, and
for example, when we were working with the sexual and gender minorities, there's the big question of definition. That as a museum, it's not our task to define what kind of sexual and gender identity people have, and it's a very problematic thing that what kind of concepts to use. In a way, like first we started to use the acronym LGBT as a lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and then we know that now we have to also add I and Q for intersexual and queer people. So it's also funny that they, but also that community themselves know how big problem it is to make that kind of definitions. But I think the key for the museum is to work together with those people. So that, for instance, in this African case about African diaspora, we had over 200 people working with the museum in the working groups, so that actually those people defined the way we are saying things. And the museum is not the authority there. But of course it means lots of work to make it in a way like that. And then of course we have to remember that we can really make mistakes as well. It's not so dangerous. And I mean, sometimes museums are so we don't accept that being criticized very easily. For instance, if you think about theaters, it's quite normal that there's a play in a theater and there are plenty of people that say, this is lousy and they don't like it and it's completely wrong. But if a museum gets criticism like that, we are terrified. We should not be so terrified. We can make mistakes as well. But it was a good question.
Please say your name before you put your question.
Okay, Mazzanti Paolo from University of Florence. And I like your presentation, and thank you for your point of view, not only about museum, but also about theories, pedagogical and philosophical, or maybe, and psychology theories. My question is a comment. It's interesting. What do you think about emotional learning? To learn by emotion, because you spoke about museum like open space, open environment for learning, but it's interesting to think about the role of emotions and inside museum, how people can by emotion be motivated to learn, and maybe using technologies or the instrument for motivate to learn by emotions.
Yeah, this is a good question also. But can we think about learning without emotions? I mean, learning totally without emotions. I think it would be impossible. There is always emotions in learning. But if we think about, let's say, working with the school groups, and let's say we are having some kind of simulations and drama and so on and everything like that, role play, they can be very inspiring for the group, so they would be motivated and working with that, and it would be so a good experience in that respect. But then we have to think about that, what do these children learn from those strong emotions? And it's also possible that they regenerate their assumptions of things during the learning, that they actually are not able to go through those wrong assumptions and that kind of things because of the strong emotion. So I think it's good to use emotions, but it's also important to be very careful with them. That if you play with strong emotions, you have to go through them later, that how it is done. And of course, when we are talking about very strong, I mean psychological emotions, it's we have to remember where we are professionals. We are not, museum people are not psychologists. We should not be making like thinking that we can, for instance, cure people who have mental problems with our emotions. That's not really there are specialists for that, and those specialists are not museum professionals.
More questions or comments, or you want to tell us what you're doing in your museum that is in line with or against what Kalle just presented?
Hi.
Well, I have a loud voice, so...
No.
Oh yeah, this one is working. Thank you for your presentation. It was just great. And I am Darya. I'm from Latvian Railway Museum. We actually flew in one plane. You sat next to me on the plane. But
you were sleeping.
Yeah, and you were reading a historical book about Baltic states at war or something. Yeah, but it's not the question. But I have a question. Sorry. I have a question more about how people in your hometown and in your land looked at the diversity that your museum gave to them, because I think now not all the people are ready to see something like you showed us in the museums, because they have still understanding of a museum like from the 19th century. Were the people ready for this kind of information?
Well, they should be. but I'm not worried if everybody is not, because there are people who are. We can't please everybody. Really, I mean that if we are playing with the themes which are hard for some people or difficult, or there are people who don't want to come to, for instance, to my museum just because it is what it is, and I don't think it's really a problem, because if there are other people who feel that this is very important, the work we are doing, and they are very tied to the museum, I'm happy to work with them. And but of course we have problems like the Lenin Museum, where there is a museum with a very old story, which is not it's not like democratic or they don't in the old exhibition they didn't tell about things that they should have told, and when we got the museum, our first thing was that this had to be renewed because it had to be acceptable for a wider audience. And I hope we will succeed in that. So it's you can't be too marginal for sure, but you can be a little marginal.
Thank you.
Yes, hello. My name is Irena. I come from the city of Rijeka, Croatia. I'm not working for a museum, so coming from a completely different context. But thank you for your inspiring, really, presentation. I would like to ask you a question. You mentioned that one of the key things that museums should do in creating their content would be working with the communities. So, and obviously it's a very difficult task. Can you share with us your experiences or some tools that you developed? So how do you work with the community? How successful have you? It's a very, I mean, for all areas, it's a very difficult, I think, task. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. It is difficult. And also it's difficult for a museum if the community is not don't see the museum as their own museum to build the trust between the community and get them involved and motivate the people. There are, of course, plenty of tools and books written about this topic, and right now in my museum we are working for an assessment model how we could also measure our actions from the perspective of participation. But that work is not yet finished, so I'm not able to tell you more about that. But I think this is there is a very good work done in this respect, for instance in Spain and Portugal. But I come from Northern Europe, and there's a language barrier. The things that happen in socio-museology are not so open for us who are not able to speak Latin languages. And there are many things going on around this topic in many museums, and And I would say the most important thing is to get out of the museum, to go to meet those people. And at least in Finland, it means drinking lots of coffee with the people. And that is really to explaining what's a museum and listening about the communities, what they are doing and so on. So, but it's really a work we have to do, because if we stay inside our building and do the things that we feel museum should be doing, it sooner or later turns out that we are doing the wrong things, and we are also running out of funders in that way.
It doesn't work. It works. Okay. Helena, Prague, Decorative Arts Museum. My question would be open. Maybe it's just an open question for the next meetings and lectures regarding the education of communities. What about immigrants? Shall we think about it as a museums? How to help? How be helpful? I'm a little bit sorry speaking from Czech Republic, which not just at the moment open too much to immigrants, but there are countries facing the problem. So would it be possible also to open this possibility to speak about?
Yeah, well, I think this is an important topic. For instance, in Finland, we don't have so many immigrants at the moment, but in the Finnish discussion, it's more or less looks like we have all of them, which is not true. We have something like received something like over 20,000 during the crisis. I know it's much more in Germany, for instance, and Sweden and so on. But of course, it's a hot debate. And right now, Finnish museums are collecting about information, what we could do with this, how we could be involved, and what we have done already, and putting it together. And there is also, the government has opened up some funding possibilities for cultural sector and so on. But I think this is something that will be discussed during the day and the coffee breaks, and so I have no ready solutions for that.
Hi, I'm Katarina from Croatia, from Croatian Museum of Tourism. If I got it right, you said that you don't use showcases, you put original objects in the context and let audience use it. So what do your curators say about that? Do they afraid for the safety of the object?
To be honest, that was only in that one exhibition. We have plenty of glass cases in our museums, as you all have. But it's just for that exhibition we decided not to use them, and it worked quite well. But of course, it's very much related to what kind of objects you are working with, really. But our visitors don't love the glass cases. They don't. The designers can love them, but not the visitors. But of course, it's very much related to what kind of theme you are working with. Yeah, but if you have a possibility, please try.
Hello, Alexandra Berberich-Slana, Slovenian Museum Association and National Liberation Museum in Maribor. Well, I have a question, but I also have a comment on what you asked and what a colleague from Croatia asked. For example, in our museum, we work with community very well because there is no project we start that we don't include them in our projects. So everything from the making of the exhibition to the programs surrounding the exhibition, which is very hard work, but it pays off, definitely. So the museum has 10 years ago, it was a closed museum. Nobody came to us unless they had to. But now, yeah, that's true. But now we are a very open museum. People like us, and people talk about our museum as about their museum. This is our museum, they always say. As you know, as far as immigrants are concerned, as you know, Slovenia, especially our part of Slovenia, has been on the brink of disaster these last few weeks. Thousands and thousands of immigrants are crossing the vicinity of Maribor, which is the city our museum is in. And we, as a museum, since we understand the meaning of community, are helping the immigrants. We are collecting clothes and food and everything, and money. And we work with the children, the immigrant children. In a way, we offer them the programs that we would we offer every other children to schools and our visitors. But on the other side, we also offer programs to schools because quite a lot of children have heard how bad immigrants were these last few months. So we work with schools, with children, about that Slovenians were immigrants quite a lot of time in the 20th century and before that as well. The last time that happened was in the Second World War. So it is easy to become a part of a solution of a problem. But I have another question for you, since you mentioned that you have decided not to have any texts at your exhibition, but on the other side you are mentioning the media and the books and that you need the curators. But has it ever happened, or could it happen, that a visitor would go through your exhibition without listening to anything or reading a book or having a curator and would understand the message in a wrong way, the way you didn't intend it to be understood? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I think what you tell about the work you are doing in your museum sounds wonderful. I mean, we should all give an applause to their work there. But to your question, I think even though if we would have the big panels and explaining that this is the point of the exhibition, this is how it should be understood, there are quite a big amount of visitors who don't read those texts. They have their own vision and they interpret it as they do, or they just read some parts, don't understand it or understand it wrong, and got an impression which supports their thinking. And we just have to live with that. If the amount of text is not the way to guarantee that we are understood in the right way, and who we are to say what is the right way in any case. So it's a complicated question, but of course we had some criticism on that as well. And for instance, now when we are working with the Lenin Museum, we will have some text there. So not very much, but we want to have, because there are certain things that which had to be said on the wall, like there were gulag camps in Soviet Union, because we don't want to give that kind of impression for the people that they weren't. So words are powerful also, but they are not necessary. We can also trust on our visitors on certain themes.
Hi, I am Clara Camacho from Portugal, from the Directorate General for Cultural Heritage. This is just a very short comment on museums and communities. I would say there is 1,000 ways of museums working with communities, but since you mentioned Portugal and Spain, and as I will have the chance of having a presentation this afternoon on the IBER Museums program, I also will have the chance maybe to point out what can be a little more specific in the Latin American context, Portugal and Spain, about this topic. That's all.
Thank you for the promotion. We are waiting for that.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. Please raise your hands, those who want to intervene. 1 and 2, okay. then we close.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Lila de Chavez. I'm coming from Athens, Greece. I am president of Heritage and Museums and a member of the Board of Trustees of the European Museum Forum. So, first of all, congratulations, because I saw so many topics that are very important. But I would like to answer to the lady with the immigrants. And since we are the first receiving all these unfortunate people in Greece, and then they go on, I would like to tell you that it is a very big issue, and my idea is for those people that are going to stay in countries, because in Greece they try to leave, they don't want to stay. But we do have many that have stayed. And with those, we are working in a sense of of how should I say, of intercultural. I've personally tried to find those who have, for instance, who are jewelers or who are weavers that have artifacts, and we try to take them into museums and into cultural sectors so that they were not going to feel excluded. Because it's not only what we can offer to them, I'm sure that they can offer to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning. I'm Michel Magnier. I work for the European Commission, which means that I spend my time protecting bears, but the rest of the time I'm the Director for Culture. I found your presentation very interesting, and I would like to ask a very personal question to you. You emphasized the important role for the society of museums, in particular for education, but also beyond education. Now, this, I think, should be based on a very solid ethical basis. You mentioned this Lenin Museum, which was a bit propagandistic. What are your views about how ethics should be developed for museums so that the population, the visitors, the communities really trust what they can see in the museums? Thank you.
Oh, good heavens. I know that, well, ethics is, of course, we in our plans and so on, we relate to the ICOM ethics, which is, of course, an easy solution. But the problem is that ICOM ethics don't help us in many situations. For instance, questions related to representation and that kind of things, that how they, it's not in the inside the ethics, and of course the people interpret them in different ways, and also there are certain things which are not, let's say, ethical in a way that if we select the themes we are working with, it's not an ethical decision. It's not. We can work with the themes which don't have much in connection with the society, and that does not make us unethical. Or if we do with the themes which have a lot to do with society, it might bring some ethical problems, or it might not. I think the ethics are very important, but it's also a very hard theme, how we can resolve these things from the ethical perspective. I think we also need the political perspective, that because politics is about, if we want to change the society into some direction, we have to think politically. And when we are thinking politically, we have to also remember the ethics. But we have to remember that also if we are thinking just, let's say, for instance, economically or aesthetically, we have to have the ethics there with us. So ethics is not the whole solution, but it's very important to have it in mind, especially when we are doing new things and when we are developing the work we are doing. Because every time we try something new, there's also the risk, and we have to take the risks, but we also have to remember that there might be some consequences related to different things, like, for instance, the ethics. Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, we have to close now, but I'm sure that you can continue the conversation during lunch. So you see, we started from education, we moved on to community, and in the end to ethics. So there are lots of challenges that are posed to museum when we deal with the issue education. I would like to thank Kalle very much for his entertaining and very useful presentation. Entertaining, which means that edutainment is still there, even if we don't call it that. And also for having prompted so many comments and questions. We now have 1.5 hours for lunch, which is a good time for networking. Don't forget, this is a networking opportunity and meeting. So have a nice lunch, and we reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.